Well, after being shielded from the media for over a month, Vice President Harris finally sat down for her first interview, 27 minutes long, and says America is ready for a new way forward.
I am so proud to be running with Tim Walz for President of the United States and to bring America what I believe the American people deserve, which is a new way forward, and turn the page on the last decade of what I believe has been contrary to where the spirit of our country really lies.
But the last decade, of course, the last 3.5 years has been part of your administration.
I'm talking about an era that started about a decade ago.
That's kind of a funny moment. Let's bring in Republican National Committee co-chair and Trump campaign surrogate, Lara Trump. Good morning to you, Lara.
Good morning.
Okay, Dana Bash asked a lot of the questions we've been talking about for the last week. What's your headline from last night's show?
I mean, honestly, Steve, it feels like Kamala Harris is running for junior class president versus president of the United States. You got no specifics whatsoever. And there was not a moment that I watched that interview and I, as an American citizen, felt confident that this is a person who understands the job of president of the United States, has a true plan of action to do anything for America, could negotiate with the world leaders on behalf of me as a citizen and this country. And I think it's kind of what we've come to expect from Kamala Harris. Look, she had to have her emotional support animal of Tim Walz with her for this interview. And she had such an opportunity. The first question Dana Bash asked her was, what would you do day one? And she had an opportunity to really go in depth on policy, say, here's how I will be as president. She said, essentially, I want to help the middle class. No specifics, no real way that she would achieve that. I'll tell you what day one she did as vice president alongside Joe Biden. They shut down the Keystone XL pipeline. That, of course, took away our energy independence, weakened our standing on the world stage, drove up gas prices, drove up inflation, and hurt who? The middle and the working classes in this country. A lot of platitudes, a lot of word salads. And then if you wanted a real example as to how phony Kamala Harris really is, I actually think it's the moment where she told the story about Joe Biden calling her. You know, it was a Sunday. I was cooking bacon and the phone rang.
Put together a puzzle.
Well, yeah, as though Ed McMahon had just surprised her by showing up with a giant check. If anyone believes she did not know that there was an orchestrated plan underway to get Joe Biden out of office and plug her in as their candidate, I've got a bridge and a couple of gold watches to sell you, Steve.
In Times Square, I saw those yesterday. Laura, here's one other soundbite where, you know, we've all seen Joe Biden's decline over the last year or so. But she has been steadfast. Before he dropped out, she said, no, he's completely with it. Watch this.
After the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have spent hours upon hours with him, be it in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. He has the intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that I think the American people rightly deserve in their president.
Well, you know what, Laura, Joe Biden was in bad shape. The New York Times, to their credit, yesterday ran an item that said, essentially, you know, we heard that the top advisors for Biden went and talked to the senators. And at the Senate meeting, apparently Senator Jack Reed said if Joe Biden wanted to stay in the office, he should submit to an examination by 2 independent neurologists who are willing to report their findings at a live news conference. And apparently the extraordinary thing about that was everybody around said, Joe's got to go. But Joe Biden's advisors never told Joe Biden the Senate wanted him to go. It wasn't until Chuck Schumer showed up at the beach house on the weekend where he goes, what do you mean they didn't tell you? Everybody wants you to go. So he was in bad shape. That's my point.
But he's in bad shape right now, Steve. He's on the beach. He's been on vacation for 2 weeks. Who is running the country? And what you heard there from Kamala Harris, I think, is very important. No, she has no regrets, America, about lying to you about the cognitive ability of the current president of the United States. He is not up to the job of president. That is very scary. We tried to call this out during the election in 2020 and warn people this was problematic for this country. Here we are right now with an inept president who doesn't seem to be on the job whatsoever. And you want us to give Kamala Harris, who lied about it and continues to lie about it, an opportunity? I don't think so. The American people deserve better. They deserve someone who day one can do the job, who has done the job, and that's President Donald J. Trump.
Speaking of President Trump, yesterday he made a statement that nobody saw this coming. He said if he wins, he would make IVF free. Didn't say how it would work or who would pay for it. Where'd that come from?
Well, I'm sure Donald Trump, unlike Kamala Harris, will actually articulate the ways in which he will go about doing such a thing. Here's what the Democrats are running on, Steve. They are running on emotion, vibes, and abortion. You saw the mobile abortion van that they had at the DNC. You could get a taco and an abortion right outside. Really nice. Wow, what a great thing for America. That is what they're running on, and they've continued to lie about Donald Trump and his stance on abortion and IVF. Donald Trump has said multiple times, I will not sign a federal abortion ban. They continue to lie about that. They continue to lie, as did Tim Walz in his speech at the DNC, about Donald Trump's stance on IVF. Donald Trump wants more babies in America, not fewer. He is very pro the miracle that IVF has given to so many families across this country, and he wanted to make his stance on that explicitly clear, and that's why he talked about it.
Okay, he did indeed. I'm sure we'll hear more details as the weekend approaches. Laura, thank you very much for joining us on this Friday.
You got it. Thanks a lot.
You bet. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.